So if you're watching the stream on TikTok, I have 2 YouTube channels. You can find me at Skeptically Speaking and Skeptical G. So we're on TikTok and 2 YouTubes. So we're going to be reading the American Crusade. Please get your own copy. Order it on Amazon. And I think you can get it through the TikTok shop as well. Andrew Seidel, American Crusade, How the Supreme Court is Weaponizing Religious Freedom. Been a great book. His other book was awesome. See if I can reach it without unplugging anything. The Founding Myth, Why Christian Nationalism is Un-American. So, we finished this book a couple weeks ago, so now we're starting a new one. And with that being said, let's get started. And if I could have a quick sound check from my moderator, that would be great. Just make sure everything's coming through on both channels. And just go ahead and leave a comment. All right. It Was Never About a Cake, Chapter 5. Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission. Jesus was a carpenter. I don't think he would have made a bed for their wedding. Jake Phillips, Masterpiece Cake Shop owner. Wow. Imagine the audacity. Jesus was a carpenter, and he thinks he knows Jesus that well that Jesus would have not made a bed for their wedding. What an odd thing to say. These Christian nationalists are insane. Charlie Craig and Dave Mullins decided to get married after 2 years together. Months before their wedding, they arrived at Masterpiece Cake Shop to taste some cakes and design their own. The owner greeted them warmly, and they sat to peruse photos of custom cakes baked for their customers. When the owner realized that Charlie and Dave were planning their own wedding to each other, the atmosphere seemed to darken. Gone were the smiles and warmth. He informed them that he wouldn't sell them a wedding cake. As Dave and Charlie told me, quote, "We never got a chance to ask for anything. This all happened so fast. It felt like forever in the moment, but we just sat down and he asked who the cake was for, and we said it was us. And he immediately said he wouldn't make a cake for our same-sex wedding. That forever moment was a gigantic, yawning, pregnant pause. Charlie and Dave left the bakery feeling humiliated, hurt, and marginalized. Charlie's mom happened to be in town, and choosing the cake was the one moment where she got to be involved in the whole process. The couple had already selected the other vendors, and none had raised an eyebrow about the fact that they were gay. She later recounted the scene in an interview. "We went into the store happy. We left broken," Charlie recalls. She didn't really understand what was happening right away, so there was this extra layer of embarrassment because we had to explain it to her that the bakery owner understood perfectly well what we asked for. That is why it's happening. "We were all upset," Charlie said, admitting he broke down in tears in the car. This kind of discrimination can be damaging. "I grew up in a small town in Wyoming, and it just wasn't okay to be gay," Charlie explained. He was bullied and struggling to be true to himself in the shadow of a hideous murder. Matthew Shepard, a 21-year-old gay man attending the University of Wyoming in Laramie, which Charlie would also attend, was abducted, tortured, beaten, robbed, tied to a fence, and set on fire, left to die. He died after 6 days of agony. The vicious murder helped launch a movement against homophobia and eventually led to a federal hate crimes law, but at the time, it also sent a chilling message. "To protect myself and my family," said Charlie, "and even protect Dave later on, I was just really closed off about it. I didn't announce to everybody that I was gay all the time, to protect myself and the people around me." Being gay is, in a way, constantly coming out of the closet, he admits. Most of the time, a person controls if and how to do that. That control allows for self-care and sensitivity, and for the once constant threat of violence. But in the bakery, that choice was impossible. It's not that Charlie planned to hide who he was, simply that he was particularly exposed and without a lifelong defense. There was no way in this situation that I could hide the fact that I was gay because I was getting a cake for Dave and I, and so it was a really vulnerable moment for me. I was in that vulnerable moment that Christian love struck. The owner explained his side on The View. I didn't believe that Jesus would have made a cake if he had been a baker. Christ wouldn't make the cake, he said in another interview, adding, I believe that the Bible clearly teaches that marriage is between one man and one woman. And I don't believe Jesus would have, because that would have contradicted the rest of the biblical teaching. Why bigotry? Well, because God. What happened isn't important as what didn't happen. The baker is a for-profit business organized and operating under the laws of the state, not an individual person. The bakery wasn't for worshiping or praying, nor was the couple asking the bakery or its employees to participate in a wedding. At the time, the business rejected the couple. They were planning a small wedding in Provincetown, Massachusetts, a small family affair for their nearest and dearest, to be followed by a big, giant party with everybody. When they got back home, then the phrase wedding cake for us was always off. It was the cake for the reception, the couple tell me. But then that's most wedding cakes. We know what happened and what didn't, because way back at the beginning of the case, the parties actually agreed on certain important facts. The undisputed fact tells the same story I just recounted. The whole conversation between Phillips, Charlie, and David was very brief, with no discussion between the parties about what the cake would look like. The refusal was not because of what they wanted on their cake. They never even discussed the design, but because they were gay. The only new piece of information that the bakery had between acceptance and rejection was that the two men were the couple getting married. They didn't discuss the decoration, the color, the artistry, or flavor. As Charlie had said, we never got a chance to ask for anything. Charlie and David signed their legal complaint hours before their wedding in Provincetown. The complaint notified the Colorado Civil Rights Commission, the state administrative body that enforced the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act, what had happened. CADA is a series of laws that prevent discrimination in employment, housing, advertising, and against people with disabilities. It's Colorado's version of the Civil Rights Act. Federal and state civil rights statutes are why businesses can't put up signs declaring no Jews or no blacks or no Irish, or implement discriminatory policies. Charlie and David brought their case with the help of the ACLU to the commission, and the commission agreed that Charlie and David, that this bakery had broken the law when it discriminated against them because of their sexual orientation. The bakery made it easy. That its standard business practice is to deny service to same-sex couples based on religious belief. The business discriminated against a class of people Colorado law protects, just so many businesses before it had discriminated against Black Americans. The commission ordered the business to stop discriminating against same-sex couples by refusing to sell them wedding cakes or any product it would sell to heterosexual couples, train its staff, and inform the commission about its progress with compliance. Sadly, this was just another business discriminating against a minority simply because of who they were. How civil rights laws work. That made the case ordinary. Hundreds of similar cases are brought before the state and federal civil rights agencies each year. State agencies like the Colorado Civil Rights Commission exist because the cases are so important and plentiful, but most people don't seem to understand how the law works. The basic idea is simple: don't discriminate. How does that function legally? Who can't discriminate? When? Where? And why can a business put up a sign that says no shirt, no shoes, no service, but not no Jews? Civil rights laws operate in basically the same way. They list groups of people who are protected. Then they list businesses, services, and the like that cannot exclude those people. The groups of people are known as protected classes. Colorado's Anti-Discrimination Act protected several classes: disability, race, creed, color, sex, sexual orientation, marital status, national origin, or ancestry. That's more than federal civil rights laws. These protected classes are statutory, established by law, and legislators may give additional groups protection if they choose. These laws establish clear legal rights, which is why line 2 is the central issue in these cases. Religion is not a license to violate other people's rights, including rights established by civil rights laws. As Charlie and Dave's case moved through the courts and up to the Supreme Court, the widespread unfamiliarity with civil rights laws bred thousands of bad gotcha analogies. Nazis in Jewish bakeries, bacon in kosher delis, KKK customers in black-owned businesses. Any good analogy here must have 1, a protected class that actually is protected under the law, 2, a place of public accommodation, and 3, a service that is being provided to others but denied to people in the protected class. Many of the analogies didn't involve protected classes. Imagine a Jewish baker being required to put a swastika on a cake, wrote the editorial board of the Chicago Tribune. Nazis aren't a protected class, so businesses can discriminate against them. Bigots aren't protected by civil rights laws, nor is political affiliation. There's an unintentional bigotry in this analogy. Why all of a sudden do gays get compared to Nazis and the KKK? Asked Dave. A good question indeed. Other analogies fail to include places of public accommodation. This means a public business, something that is meant to be open to the public. Your house does not count. Civil rights laws don't require you to host a gay wedding in your backyard. Finally, other analogies fail to understand a third requirement, the service aspect. If a business provides a service, it must provide it to members of protected classes. Civil rights laws do not tell businesses what they must sell, only that if the business sells a certain product, it cannot refuse to sell it to certain classes of people. For instance, if you don't bake wedding cakes for any customers, you don't have to start when a couple, gay or straight, asks. The government can't force a kosher deli to serve bacon because it never served bacon. The government can tell a kosher deli that it must the government can tell a kosher deli that it must sell a pastrami on rye to people in protected classes. That's how these laws work, with one caveat. They always exclude any place that is principally used for religious purposes. As the Colorado statute phrases it, from the definition of a place of accommodation. So no church, synagogue, mosque, or other houses of worship need worry about the gays kicking down their doors and forcing homophobic preachers to pronounce their marriage vows. Businesses organized and protected under the laws of the state have other rules to follow. Charlie and Dave's case was typical of its genre, but it was made special, a cause célèbre, by crusaders who saw an opportunity. The Alliance Defending Freedom strikes again. God's Warriors. Ace, this sounds... Are you saying if chicks sell boxes, they can't not sale equal to losers? I have no idea. I'm sure that comment made sense. You'll have to rephrase that because I cannot make heads or tails of that comment. Pin it again if it's restructured, because that makes no sense to me. Okay, ADF skillfully manipulated and distorted the narrative of the case. Instead of a loving couple being victimized by a bigoted business owner, the narrative flipped into the gays and the big bad government coercing a poor, persecuted Christian artist. Many people still know the bakery's name, but not the names of the couple that suffered the discrimination. Weaponizing religious freedom is ADF's principal mission. It was created to entrench homophobia and anti-LGBTQ bigotry, and quickly decided religious freedom was the best tool for that. This is a best captured by a simple fact. Alan Sears, who ran ADF for its first 25 years, co-authored a book titled The Homosexual Agenda, Exposing the Principal Threat to Religious Freedom Today. The title says it all, using religious freedom to oppose LGBTQ rights and equality. When Dave rhetorically asks, why all of a sudden do gays get compared to Nazis? It's because this is a page out of ADF's playbook. Okay. The Homosexual Agenda, Sears wrote that the radical homosexual activity community has adopted many of the tactics used in Nazi Germany. Sears likened his fight to overturn marriage equality to Lincoln's fight to abolish slavery, an analogy as historically flawed as it is narcissistic and deluded. Sears retired in 2017 after it was clear the Crusaders had captured the Supreme Court and would eventually succeed. Michael Ferris, who founded the Homeschool Legal Defense Association and Patrick Henry College to secure homeschool graduates and funnel them into Republican politics, now runs ADF. ADF is one of the youngest and one of the biggest crusaders, a group of televangelists and radio preachers, many of them Christian nationalists such as D. James Kennedy and James Dobson, founded the Alliance Defense Fund, as it was originally known, in 1993 to undermine the work of the ACLU. Sears' homosexual agenda shows something of an obsession with the ACLU. ADF's total annual revenue exceeded $60 million in 2019. Homophobia and bigotry are baked into the ethos of the ADF, and the Southern Poverty Law Center classifies the ADF as a hate group. ADF litigated many of the cases in this book, including the government prayer case where the court reimagined the fact. Churches challenged public health orders, the companion case of the Hobby Lobby, and the Missouri Children's Ministry case. The ADF works to alter public perception, to cast American Christians as poor minorities besieged by culture and persecuted by the government. You could always count on a entitled class of people to come up to that kind of a ideology. Absolutely ridiculous. But here we are. An Attorney General Jeff Sessions visited ADF's headquarters and consulted with it on a massive religious liberty memo he imposed on the DOJ. Trump made an attorney in ADF's allied network, Noel Francisco, Solicitor General. Francisco then had the United States wade into the cake case on the Baker side when it reached the Supreme Court. An extraordinary step, even participating in the oral arguments himself. It may be impossible to understand just how devastating that was when I was reading their brief in the Supreme Court. Charlie tells me, it didn't say the Trump administration, it said the United States of America. And that was just a really awful feeling to read those words, and the United States of America does not believe Dave and I have equal rights. ADF tainted almost everyone's understanding of reality with a comprehensive and expensive media strategy. But the ACLU outlawyered ADF at every step. ADF offered two big legal arguments. One, free speech. The government can't compel a person to craft a message in support of gay marriage. Two, religious freedom. The government can't compel a person to act against their religious beliefs, but these arguments depend on what actually happened that day at the bakery. Judges and law professors are fond of hypotheticals, but cases are about reality and impact real lives. Accompanying those arguments was a massive dodge, a business refusing to serve people, but ADF substituted a person for that corporation. We'll look at that distinction first, then free speech, then religious freedom. Baker or bakery. The Alliance Defending Freedom was remarkably successful at conflating the corporation with its owner, who comes off as a gentle, soft-spoken on camera. Soft-spoken bigotry is still bigotry, and the bakery was still a business. A business is a business mall. The Mission Trace Shopping Center, alongside Freaky Smoke Shop and Tattoo 9, Moho Massage, Vaporgate, and Pizza Hut, and the H&R Block, and other businesses. It's open to the public and, like other businesses, sells products. Not just cakes for special occasions, but t-shirts, candles, cookies, cinnamon rolls, banana bread, coffee, and mugs. If you buy a mug, you get a free coffee. The bakery is a legal entity organized under Colorado's law, which protects the individuals behind the business from personal liability. If a cake gives 50 people food poisoning, the bakery can be sued, but not the owner personally. The business may have to fork over some cash, but the owner's personal assets are protected. The business could borrow heavily and fail spectacularly, consumed by debt, but the shareholders and owners aren't personally liable for those debts. This separation is fundamental to American business. Before the Crusade, the Supreme Court called it a general principle of corporate law deeply ingrained in our economic and legal systems. And even this court would probably agree with the principle outside the religious freedom context. 30 corporate law professors explained, this separation is not an ancillary part of the corporate law and governance. It is instead the sine qua non of the wealth-creating legal innovation of the corporate form. It's difficult to overstate how important the separation is. The massive benefits of forming a legal corporation come with some burdens, including obeying laws meant for corporations and places of public accommodation, rather than for individual citizens. Jack Phillips had enjoyed the protections of this corporate separation, the corporate veil, for 20 years. Masterpiece Cake Shop Incorporated was founded as a corporation in 1992 with 2 shareholders and a 4-person board of directors to operate a retail bakery. During this litigation, it reorganized several times. Of course it did. Phillips may personally believe that Jesus wouldn't make a cake for a gay couple, but in 2017, a few months before the Supreme Court heard oral arguments, the bakery reorganized as a limited liability company that didn't even list Phillips on the paperwork. A little weird, isn't it? Phillips used the laws of the state of Colorado to create a legal entity that was deliberately and completely distinct from him as an individual. He then sought to use the creation to discriminate in the name of his personal God. The state may prevent entities created under its law from being used for such an end. If Charlie and Dave had knocked on the door of Phillips' house and said, "Hey, we hear you bake cakes. Would you make one for our wedding?" Phillips could have said no without consequence. But Phillips didn't say no. Masterpiece Cake Shop Incorporated said no. Imagine a world in which this was not the case, in which for-profit companies could exempt themselves from rules and regulations because an employee or shareholder or owner or operator or employee disagrees with the rules. Guaranteed religious exemption is a competitive marketplace, would launch a race to the bottom as every business decided which rules to follow or not. How long would it take oil companies to realize that simply by claiming to adhere to this or that religion, they no longer have to comply with environmental regulations? Because employees and shareholders or owner of the operator employee disagree with the rules. Guaranteed religious exemption is a competitive marketplace. How long before it takes oil companies to no longer comply with environmental regulations? And before you shrug this off as unlikely, recall the Representative John Shimkus, Republican from Illinois, once claimed that global climate change might be happening, but we don't need to worry about it because God promised Noah he wouldn't flood the earth again. The Evangelical Declaration on Global Warming states 4 beliefs and 4 denials of belief, including, we deny that carbon dioxide is a pollutant. How hard would it be for a company to adopt this religious declaration as a sincere religious belief? Want to test your drugs on animals? The biblical God gave man dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over the cattle and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. You want to keep women out of management positions? The Christian God permits no woman to teach or assume authority over a man. She must be quiet. Okay. Oh boy. When I wrote about this race to the bottom after the Hobby Lobby decision in 2014, I worried that racism, sexism, and homophobia all have biblical and religious support for any company to avoid complying with all the burdensome equality legislation. These fears aren't hypothetical, but real cases. In 1990, a Christian school paid male employees 25% more than females using a head of household salary supplement because the Bible clearly teaches that husband is the head of the house, head of the wife, head of the family. The school also underpaid support staff for years. Uh, the school argued that it didn't have to comply with wage laws because its pay scale was based on a sincerely held belief derived from the Bible. The court rejected this argument in 1990, partially using line 2. In another case, a religious nonprofit funded its proselytizing ministry with commercial business, including gas stations, retail clothing and grocery stores, farms, construction companies, a record keeping company, a motel, candy companies. To keep costs down, the business employed workers, most of whom were drug addicts, derelicts, and criminals before their conversion and rehabilitation, but didn't pay the workers a salary, instead, giving them food, clothing, shelter, and other benefits. The businesses had a sizable edge over secular competitors because they didn't pay employees, let alone pay them fairly. The Supreme Court rejected the argument in 1983. In Colorado, the court would depart from its precedent and bring us closer to the imaginary world by simply ignoring the bedrock principle of American corporate law. Free speech. The parties agreed upon facts. Destroy the free speech argument. The bakery didn't reject a message, but they rejected people. It didn't refuse to design a specific cake because of that cake, because of what the cake communicated. It refused to design any cake for them. The first judge found that the undisputed evidence is that the Phillips categorically refused to prepare a cake for Charlie and Dave, same-sex wedding, before there was any discussion about what the cake would look like. Phillips was not asked to apply any message or symbol to the cake or to construct the cake in any fashion that would be reasonably understood as advocating same-sex marriage. The bakery had no idea about their potential design, only who they were. For all Phillips knew at the time, explained the judge, the couple might have wanted a nondescript cake that would have been suitable for consumption at any wedding. The free speech claim was specious, to say the least. It's also specious in another respect. What kind of a cake is gay? The couple asked me. It's a good point. What's the difference between a gay wedding cake and a straight wedding cake? If given a lineup of 20 cakes, could you sort them into gay or straight? The three tiered white wedding cake with the word congratulations, is that one gay or not? Charlie and Dave didn't want a rainbow cake. They wanted a minimalist cake, probably 3 tiers of white cake that incorporated red, teal, their wedding colors. In the end, that's pretty much what they got. It was only after they were discriminated against that they added a single rainbow layer under the icing. There's an argument to be made that cakes are expensive speech, but Justice Sonia Sotomayor disposed of this nicely in oral argument. The primary purpose of a food of any kind is to be eaten. Now, some people might love the aesthetic appeal of a special dessert and look at it for a very long time, but in the end, its only purpose is to be eaten. I love the Great British Bake Off more than the next person. But I agree, cakes are food meant to be eaten. At oral argument, much of the free speech discussion centered on hypotheticals involving chefs, makeup artists, sandwich artists, jewelers, hairstylists, hotel chefs, and more. Hypotheticals about denying service to the KKK were popular. There was often even a hypo about a cake celebrating Kristallnacht. These analogies were shockingly bad for the three reasons explained above. They were still trotted out by the nation's top jurists. Interestingly, the bakery admitted under questioning from Justice Alina Kagan that a hairstylist is absolutely not engaging in expression or protected speech. And neither are the makeup artist, Taylor, or most telling, the chef. Bakers are speaking, but chefs aren't, was the sum of the Crusader speech argument. Charlie mentioned another curious moment during oral arguments that undermines the free speech claim. They asked if Jack Phillips would give us an already made cake, a pre-made cake. There were quite a few such exchanges, and the Crusaders repeatedly said things like, in the context of a pre-made cake, that Mr. Phillips is happy to sell anything in his store. But Charlie told me that he was watching Phillips, not the justices, and while that was happening, Phillips was shaking his head no. So, yeah, they will take every opportunity to discriminate. They don't give a damn. Even while their lawyer is trying to eke out something, just to give the judges something to go on, this piece of shit is sitting off to the side, shaking his head. No, I wouldn't sell them anything if I found out they were gay. This is what an entitled, protected class looks like. This is how they act. This is called protected bigotry. Okay, let's not get it twisted. Between oral argument, admissions, and the undisputed facts, it would have been almost impossible for the court to decide the case in the baker's favor on free speech grounds. So instead, the court decided the case on religious freedom, but probably not how you remember. Hostility towards religion. The Supreme Court should have reiterated line 2 in this case. Sorry, bakery, your owner's religion does not trump the rights of others. Done. Instead, it invented some hostility against a bigoted bakery. Essentially, it gave the bakery a get-out-of-jail-free card. It didn't fully weaponize religious freedom. This was before Kavanaugh and Barrett, when Kennedy was still the swing vote. Reading between the lines of Kennedy's 7-2 opinion, it sounds like the court was looking for a way out of deciding a case that initially seemed to involve simpler issues. The justices held that the Colorado Civil Rights Commission said mean things about the religion of a man who runs the bakery. The court claims this hostility tainted the entire civil rights case against the bakery, and so the court threw it all out. In doing so, it ratified the bakery's overt hostility toward LGBTQ people. Hostility toward religion was barely mentioned by the parties, let alone argued as a central pillar of the case. In 345 pages of briefing from the principal parties in the United States, it was an afterthought. Maybe 11 paragraphs and one footnote mentions hostility. In the 87 minutes of oral argument, hostility toward religion came up during a brief exchange between Justice Kennedy that, though short, is in hindsight revealing because Kennedy tipped his hand. This exchange was noteworthy but unexpected even for conservative observers. Kennedy mentioned a single quote by one commissioner that he actually misattributed to a different commissioner, inadvertently confessing to the rhetoric nature of the comment. It was so unimportant, he couldn't get the name right. Hostility was barely mentioned in the briefing and misattributed in oral arguments because hostility wasn't real. We are witnessing its creation. In the opinion, Kennedy wrote, the neutral and respectful consideration in which Phillips was entitled was compromised here. However, the Civil Rights Commission's treatment of this case has more elements of a clear and impermissible hostility toward the sincere religious beliefs that motivated his objection. That's a harsh accusation to level at any official, but especially those charged with protecting civil rights and eradicating discrimination. That's career-ending criticism, and it was unfounded. Kennedy manufactured this hostility from 3 pieces of evidence. 2 commissioners statements that he mangled and fragmented, and a homophobic troll. Commissioner Rice's statement. Kennedy focused primarily on one statement by Commissioner Diane Rice, which he misattributed to another commissioner in oral arguments. Rice's comments came after the case was over. The commission responded. The notice of appeal had already filed. The commissioners had considered the merits and were just deciding whether or not to stay their final order. They had already rejected the bakery's arguments 3 separate times and voted unanimously against the stay. The case was over. The commissioner's work was done. But Kennedy claimed that the entire case against the bakery had to be thrown out because the commission was so hostile to Christianity during that case that the bakery couldn't receive a fair hearing. But Rice's comment was quite literally the last substantive comment in that hearing, and therefore the commission's inquiry. She said, "Religion of freedom and religion has been used to justify all kinds of discrimination throughout history." So far, so true. Whether it be slavery, whether it be the Holocaust, whether it be, and I mean we can list hundreds of situations where freedom of religion has been used to justify discrimination. And to me, it is one of the most despicable pieces of rhetoric that people can use to use their religion to hurt others. So that's my personal point of view. Where in the fucking goddamn hell is the attack? I ask you. Everything she said in that statement was true. There's no attack. Can anybody point out to me the attack in that statement? Religious freedom has been used to justify discrimination. Yes, they did that in the Deep South. They used it to justify slavery in the 1800s. They used religious freedom to discriminate against Black people. They segregated schools based on religious freedom. And when they lost that, they started religious charter schools. These people are the snowflakiest of the snowflakes. Kennedy's retelling truncated Rice's quote to exclude the final sentence, so that's just my personal point of view. Kennedy took umbrage at Rice's words. To describe a man's faith as one of the most despicable pieces of rhetoric that people can use is to disparage his religion in at least 2 distinct ways by describing it as despicable. Well, it is. And also by characterizing it as merely rhetorical, something insubstantial and even insincere. Okay, I'll give you that. It's sincerely held bigotry. There. Happy? Thank you for the squirrels. I appreciate it. Please become a skeptic. Hit that orange heart. Become a skeptic. Join the skeptic community. Rice later told me that Kennedy's rendering of her words was wrong on many levels, but I think it's a deliberate misreading. Rice was arguing for line 2, a line the Supreme Court upheld until this crusade. When Justice Alito delivered the keynote address to Leo's Federalist Society, he mentioned not only the Masterpiece Cake Shop case, but also singled out Rice's statement for additional opprobrium. As a college freshman at George Washington University, Rice and her friends went to civil rights marches on the Mall. The young Rice heard Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. Rice tells me, his speech gave me chills, and it is what has led me to where I am and my beliefs. Since then, people's rights have always been at the core of my beliefs. Rice comes across as a thoughtful, careful public servant, concerned with the rule of law and human rights, nothing like the bigot of Kennedy's opinion. I believe to my core that every person should be allowed their faith and their beliefs, and far be it for me to criticize, but I will always believe it's wrong to use your religion or beliefs to hurt or discriminate against someone else. That's line 2. She believes in freedom and equality, but that necessarily means one person's religion cannot trump another person's rights. I asked Rice about being the Supreme Court scapegoat. I was very disappointed and hurt at the time, but said she also had the perspective throughout our conversation. She touched on the hurt and anger over Kennedy twisting her words, but her overriding feeling was frustration that this might have hurt civil rights. I really regret that the work of the Civil Rights Commission was hurt. That's my biggest regret. She worried that Kennedy's decision made the entire Civil Rights Division take a step back and say, maybe we can't fight this battle. Her name is Sally Alice, says, it's Judgment Day for y'all. I am. Y'all lost. Thank Jesus for that. Would you even recognize Jesus if he walked up to you? Would you even recognize Jesus? Would you recognize him if he came across the southern border and got thrown in a cage and deported? What if he walked into a church that you'll probably never go to? Jesus is the TVA companies. My God, this person. Religion poisons everything, does it not? It poisons our minds. It poisons just the way we communicate. It poisons how we interact, doesn't it? This person can't even put, yeah, oh yeah. Now they want to spam. Okay, Sally. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and mute. Let's see if that works. Thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Filter comments similar to those flagged by our community. What in the world? These comments are disruptive or spam comments, potentially unkind. Oh, come on. Spam comments are fine. I'll allow that filter. But unkind words, I'm okay. I can deal with unkind. All right. If she's done crying, I'll go ahead and continue. It also shattered some illusions she had about this court, which many Americans still have. It hurts. It made me somewhat angry. It made me realize that I wanted the Supreme Court to be that one place, that one pillar in our democracy that is above politics, where the decisions are made on the basis of law and precedent. I thought that they left their political bias behind. I question that every day now. Rice's statements are, of course, true, and they're true to the extent she was talking explicitly about religion rather than religious freedom. Half of Americans who opposed same-sex marriage in 2012 justified that stance by citing their religion or the Bible. Religion has been used to justify slavery and murder. More to the point, the Bankery is the case was claiming a right to discriminate based on religious freedom. Religiously motivated bigotry was one of the issues of the commission and had to decide because the Bankery made it an issue. Judicial bodies routinely declare that bigotry and discrimination are wrong, abhorrent, odious, and even despicable. Many Supreme Court justices have said so. Kennedy himself, in an opinion penned during the previous term, said via quote, that racial discrimination is odious in all aspects and especially pernicious in the administration of justice. But saying that such bigotry is motivated by religion, even when true and the bigot himself is claiming so, is apparently a bridge too far. Commissioner Hiram's statement. Kennedy also constructed hostility from another statement in an earlier meeting. One commissioner suggested that Phillips can believe what he wants to believe, but cannot act on his religious beliefs if he decides to do business in the state. A few moments later, the commissioner restated the same position. If a businessman wants to do business in the state and he's got an issue with the laws impacting his personal belief system, he needs to look at being able to compromise. Kennedy suggesting different interpretations were possible, but chose to read those as inappropriate and dismissive comments, showing the lack of due consideration for Phillips' free exercise rights and the dilemma he faced. This is so disingenuous as to be dishonest. Commissioner Raju Hiram was restating lines 1 and 2. In the first sentence, Kennedy mangled. The transcript actually reads, I don't think the act necessarily prevents Mr. Phillips from believing what he wants to believe, but if he decides to do business in the state, he's got to follow inaudible. In the second sentence, Hiram was trying to quote a concurring opinion in the New Mexico Supreme Court's Elaine photography case, in which the court said a photography business cannot discriminate against LGBTQ couples. The Supreme Court refused to hear that same case 3 years before it accepted Charlie and Dave's case. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg cites the same case in her Hobby Lobby dissent. Hiram explicitly invoked the court's decision these same justices allowed to stand. And I believe it was the best said by the judges in the New Mexico case, where the laws are here to protect individuals from humiliation and dignitary harm. I'm referring to the comments made by Justice Boson in that case. And essentially, he was saying that if a business wants to do business in the state, he's got an issue with the laws impacting his personal belief system. He needs to look at being able to compromise. And I think it was very well said by that judge. This thoughtful public servant was not offering an off-the-cuff opinion, but trying to decide a clearly identical case by referring to the opinion of top jurists in a similar case that the Supreme Court let stand. This is how public officials should behave. The judicial passage to which Commissioner Hiram was referring is eloquently on the necessity of line 2. At its heart, this case teaches that at some point in our lives, all of us must compromise, if only a little, to accommodate the contrasting value of others. A multicultural, pluralistic society, one of our nation's strengths, demands no less. The owners of the photography business are free to think, say, to believe as they wish. They may pray to God of their choice and follow these commandments in their personal lives wherever they lead. The Constitution protects the owners in that respect, and much more. But there is a price, one that we all have to pay somewhat in our civic life. In the smaller, more focused world of the marketplace, of commerce, of public accommodation, the owners have to channel their conduct, not their beliefs, so as to leave space for other Americans who believe something different. That compromise is part of the glue that holds us together as a nation, the tolerance that lubricates the various moving parts of us as a people. And I think it's safe to say we have gotten well far away from that. Wouldn't you say? This is accurate, well stated, and for a legal opinion, somewhat moving. It's certainly not hostile towards religion. To say, as Kennedy did, that paraphrasing this opinion shows a lack of due consideration for the baker's religion is a lie. 6 fellow justices assented to that lie. Raju Hiram grew up in the Hindu faith, in Madras among Muslims, and had a Zoroastrian mentor. He went to an Irish Catholic school, then a Syrian Christian school, then a Jesuit college for a time, and an engineering school before coming to the States for graduate school. He told me that he served on the commission to give back to the community. One conversation revealed a thoughtful, measured man, neither Democrat nor Republican, a small businessman, a caring person trying to do the right thing. I was sick when I saw what the justices said about him. That was not pleasant. When I asked how it feels knowing that because of this opinion, his name will be remembered in this way, he responds that it is, in a word, appalling. He even hoped that the court might revisit this decision and set the record straight, clear his name, as it were. After reading Kennedy's opinion, Hiram tells me, I think I decided it correctly. No, businesses do not have the right to refuse service to anyone. That is incorrect and wrong. They do not have the right to refuse service to anyone arbitrarily. If you are serving the public, then you do not have the right to pick and choose who you're going to serve. David Malum thinks he's a lawyer. Oh my goodness, how cute. How good of you to join us. Thank you. Let's see. Largely because of these two statements, Kennedy wrote, Phillips' religious objection was not considered with the neutrality that the free exercise clause requires. This is not only wrong, but absurd. At worst, religious bigotry was called out in mild, truthful terms, and only because the bakery made it an issue, and only after the case was decided, Kennedy took issue with the tone. Then the White House press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, was, of course, actually not far off the mark when she said, the Supreme Court rightly concluded that the Colorado Civil Rights Commission failed to show tolerance and respect to the bakery's religious beliefs. Or to quote Kennedy, this sentiment is inappropriate. That was about tone and propriety, not the law. Basically, the commission was mean. No. It's not about the situation. You do not get to pick and choose which of the public you get to not service, And we're not talking about people who are belligerent, acting stupid, or causing havoc and mayhem. We're talking about people coming into a establishment like a restaurant and ordering something or buying something that everyone else gets to do, order or buy. And the business owner or the employee decides, oh, I don't want to serve black people today. Or, oh, this person looks gay. I'm going to refuse them service. They can't do that. That's why we have civil rights in this country. I know some of you racist MAGAs are really, it chaps your ass every time you hear civil rights. And I know you want to go back to the 1950s or hell, even further back. I understand you want to do this, but you can't. I have a good soul. I don't know. Have you seen inside me lately? It's tough. But thank you for the kind words anyway. Oh, the commission was mean. The decision elevates delicate Christian sensibilities over the civil rights of citizens. To offend Christianity, even in the slightest manner, is to be hostile to religion in a way that violates the Constitution. Have you seen the way these Christian nationalists treat Satanists? Have you seen it? Have you seen how they treat Muslims and Hindus? These people are nasty sons of bitches. Ugh. The troll, a victim offered Kennedy the final piece of evidence for the commission's hostility toward Christianity. The internet slang, a troll, is an attention seeker who traffics in inflammatory rhetoric to antagonize and sow chaos and discord. That's you, David. As Supreme Court author and journalist Ian Millhiser pointed out, to defend Masterpiece Cake Shop Incorporated, a troll visited other Colorado bakeries and demanded custom cakes with homophobic imagery and Bible verses. For instance, an image of two groomsmen holding hands in front of a cross with a red X over the image, decorated with Bible verses, like God hates sin, homosexuality is detestable sin. The troll filed 3 cases. All 3 recount him asking for Leviticus 18, which says, give the following instructions to the people of Israel. I am the Lord your God. The troll can't even get his own biblical bigotry right. He meant Leviticus 18:22. Do not practice homosexuality, having sex with another man as with a woman. It is a detestable sin. The troll's delicious biblical illiteracy, like some of the people in the comments, our inattention to detail are fitting. He's a young earth creationist who founded Jesus camps and gave Christians biblically correct tours of zoos and science and history museums. He agreed that inclusive public schools are whorehouses and we need to burn them down. Not just that, but that earlier generations of Americans would, if alive today, tear the bricks out of the walls and use the bricks to stone the apostates. This is what these religious fundamentalists actually believe. When you give people like this power, when you give them any leeway in your government, this is the type of rhetoric. You think the Muslim extremists are violent? These people are hand in glove with that movement. These people would bring back stoning if they could get away with it. You don't think it can't happen here, huh? You think Handmaid's Tale is just fiction? Whew. Some people not be paying attention. Moving along. This was Kennedy's counterbalance for the commission's inappropriate tone. Keep tapping that screen, guys, please, and thank you. Yes, it is already happening, and it is disturbing. I agree. The troll targeted bakeries he identified as gay-friendly. Each bakery listened to the troll's design requests. Unlike Masterpiece Cake Shop Incorporated, none kicked the troll out when they realized he was a Christian. Each bakery employed Christians and regularly prepared custom Christian theme and Bible cakes for anyone, but all refused to make bigotry cakes for anyone, including this troll. Thank you for the gifts. I appreciate that. The gleeful troll brought his 3 cases to the Colorado Civil Rights Commission, which found no discrimination. The law requires businesses to treat people from protected classes as they would treat any other customer. Unfortunately for this troll, but bigotry is not a protected class. Do you get it now? But I'm telling you, these whack jobs really want to make Christian bigotry a protected class. They really do. And they'll do it too if they have their way. More obviously, civil rights laws were meant to stop discrimination. They outlaw discrimination primarily, but are also intended to protect businesses that refuse to discriminate. Bigots once demanded businesses to discriminate or face boycotts or worse, common KKK tactics before such laws existed. Masterpiece Cake Shop made a lot of money selling wedding cakes, six figures annually off about 200 to 250 wedding cakes of about $500 each. The bakery tried to get around selling wedding cakes, but not to gays, but later arguing that it would sell Charlie and David a bland, undecorated cake, but not a custom cake, or sell them birthday cakes or shower cakes, sell you cookies or brownies. I just don't make cakes for same-sex weddings. But from a legal standpoint, even if that were factually true, we settled the separate but equal stupidity a few decades ago. Separate isn't equal. It's discrimination. Like a drowning man thrown a lifeline, Kennedy seized on the troll, the creationist who wants to stone apostates and the gays and burn down public schools as evidence of hostility against Christians. Imagine the gall, the tenacity, the audacity. The same person wants to bring back stoning, and he has the gall to be upset that no one wants to placate him. No one wants to tolerate his bigotry. These people have no shame at all. This exposed the raging hypocrisy at the center of the opinion. Kennedy pointed to the explicit religious bigotry of that troll who wanted to proclaim that homosexuality is a detestable sin to justify his decision, while also arguing in that decision that it's hostile to religion to point out that bigotry in the name of God exists. Kennedy disproved his own argument. Religious freedom and civil rights laws. In Charlie and Dave's case, the justices all agree that civil rights laws are perfectly valid and legitimate. It's unexceptional that Colorado law protect gay persons. Nevertheless, a larger conversation wedges itself into arguments about whether religion should be a license to discriminate. Its basic thrust is that civil rights laws are wrong, though it's rarely phrased so candidly. Instead, the argument usually sounds something like, why not just get another cake from another store? Does that sound familiar? You don't want a bigot making your cake anyway. Just go somewhere else, or sometimes the free market punishes bigots with less business. Understanding the history and success of civil rights laws is crucial to understanding why these arguments are wrong. Martin Luther King Jr. explained in a letter to his fellow clergymen, penned on scraps of paper smuggled out of the Birmingham jail by his lawyers, the harm of these laws guard against. King listed injustices Black people have endured, such as being forced to sleep night after night in the uncomfortable corners of your automobile because no motel will accept you, and being constantly humiliated by nagging signs reading white and colored. Another outrage spoke to every parent. When you suddenly find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she can't go to the public amusement park that has just been advertised on television, you see tears welling up in her eyes when she is told that Funtown is closed to colored children, and see ominous clouds of inferiority beginning to form in her little mental sky. The harm is not just denying a motel room or an amusement park or cake, but also denying a person's humanity. The incalculable damage of implanting that heinous sense of inferiority in a child's impressionable mind is the real and enduring harm. That the harm is mental and difficult to quantify makes it no less real. The physical denial is harmful too. Sleeping in a car, as King was forced to do, may not seem risky, but during a Wisconsin winter or in a state where the KKK roamed the night. And what if it weren't being denied entry into Funtown, but groceries, food, or baby formula, or gas, or medical care? Just go somewhere else might not meet the exigencies or even be possible. Before the Civil Rights Act, entire towns denied services to Black people. The KKK firebombed businesses that dared to treat Blacks equally. Successful Black businesses were also targeted. Rampaging whites killed and jailed Black citizens in the Tulsa Massacre of 1921, and then targeted the thriving Black business community known as Black Wall Street, burning down 40 city blocks. 40 city blocks. Widespread denials of service could happen again. In early 2016, Georgia legislators proposed a new religious freedom law that would weaponize religious freedom just like Mississippi's law. CNN visited a small Georgia town and interviewed all 5 of the florists who admitted that they would refuse to serve LGBTQ people if given legal sanction. These could easily be gas stations or grocery stores or doctors refusing to treat children because of who their parents are. These are real examples. What if the next town is the same, and the town after that? After civil rights groups organized pressure from businesses such as the NFL, Coca-Cola, and film and television studios, Governor Nathan Deal vetoed the Georgia bill. Without these laws, discrimination thrives, and the Supreme Court's utter failure to do the right thing in this case also led to more discrimination. Dr. Nita Barak-Koren documented a substantial increase in discrimination against LGBTQ people in the wake of this bad decision. Her team contacted about 1,000 wedding vendors, photographers, bakers, florists, 4 different times, pretending to be part of the same-sex couple before and after the decision, and pretending to be part of the opposite-sex couple before and after the decision. The court's decision seemed to have exposed same-sex couples to heightened risk of discrimination. It emboldened discrimination evenly across conservative, liberal, rural, suburban, urban divides. But the discriminatory effect of the decision was significantly more pronounced in countries with relatively more religious congregations per capita. Just look at the Native Americas. Well, Michael, biblical studies. What the fuck are you trying to say to me? Just look at the Native Americas. What is a Native America? Michael, you're going to have to work on your straw man arguments. You need to word them better. Enforcing civil rights laws work. The market, on the other hand, failed because market solutions assumed that people made rational rather than emotional decisions. We don't. One major political party has consistently convinced about half the electorate to vote against its own economic self-interest. Native Americans, what are you talking about Native Americans for? The way Native Americans have been treated in this country today, I think you need to keep their name out of your fucking mouth. I don't want to hear anything about the Native Americans. We're not talking about Native Americans in this live. We're talking about religious bigotry and weaponized religious freedom. That's what we're talking about. Native Americans own this country. We should leave. Okay. You're free to leave if you want. Moving along. Okay. Markets also reward bigotry. The reward mechanism is disputed, but exists. Chick-fil-A capitalized on its owner's bigotry. It became a hub for the anti-same-sex marriage brigade, and eating there became its own form of activism, leading to long lines and huge profits. Bigotry also brought notoriety and customers to Masterpiece Cake Shop Incorporated. Media profiles often include anecdotes about customers shopping to express their support for homophobia. It happens all the time. People organize fundraisers. One pulled in more than 300,000 and continues to take donations. Another raised 75,000. The company's legal team worked for free. It's inconvenient for me? No, it's not inconvenient. It's just bullshit. And I don't care. There's no inconvenience here. The bakery owner sold the rights for his book. A free, unrestricted market populated by irrational, emotional consumers and producers is incapable of solving every problem, including discrimination against stigmatized minority. Finally, there is the freedom argument against the civil rights laws. 2 months after King was jailed in Birmingham, President John F. Kennedy delivered a televised address on civil rights. He wanted a law to guarantee all Americans the right to be served in facilities which are open to the public: hotels, restaurants, theaters, retail stores, and civil establishments. That law would be the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Kennedy was assassinated 5 months after this address. The Civil Rights Act went into effect July, and by October, the Supreme Court was hearing oral arguments in a case challenging the law. The owner of the Heart of Atlanta Motel was a virulent segregationist and an attorney. I guess education. Lincoln lined up a bunch of Native Americans. Well, Michael, your Bible advocates for entire groups of people to be wiped out. You know, you think that's evil, but the Bible, the same Bible that you're studying, actually talks about it being a good thing. So maybe you should look inward and stop going. You got to go, what, 250 years to find an example? I mean, next you're going to bring up what? Andrew Jackson, I guess? My goodness. You people are desperate. But thank you for coming in for the reading of American Crusade. You can always trust religious bigots to do the same thing. And they bring up straw man arguments, and they want to weaponize religious freedom. Yes, I am very evil. Thank you for noticing. I'm skeptical. And by your Bible standards, I'm very evil. Yes. It is a straw man argument. It really is. Because it's actually, no, it's worse than a straw man argument. It's apropos of nothing. It's not connected to what we're doing here. But you're here to embarrass yourself. You may, you know what? I'm going to give you the freedom to embarrass yourself. Continue. Oh, bigotry, rewards, media, blah, 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 blah. Yep. Oh, yeah. The owner of the Heart of Atlanta, he was an attorney, so he argued the case himself. The fundamental question I submit is whether or not Congress has the power to take away the liberty of an individual to run his business as he sees fit in the selection and choice of his customers. Does that sound familiar? This is exactly the same arguments these bigots are bringing to the table. Nothing has changed. They have no new arguments. The The racist Motelier rooted his liberty argument in the 13th and 14th Amendments. The audacity. The unanimous court batted away the arguments with a restrained contempt that I find pleasing. It would be highly ironical to use the guarantee of due process, a guarantee which plays so important a part in the 14th Amendment, an amendment adopted with the predominant aim of protecting Negroes from discrimination. In order to strip Congress of power to protect Negroes from discrimination, recall that the same business that yearn for freedom are taking advantage of many laws and regulations that protect them from financial and legal liability when they breach a contract or human finger ends up in a customer's food. A disturbing common occurrence. Strings can be and should be attached to these protections. Perhaps the most grotesque iteration of this freedom argument is the forced equality amounts to involuntary servitude. That violates the 13th Amendment. Slavery. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery and involuntary servitude. Attached to the contemptuous sentence batting down the Motelier's 14th Amendment freedom argument is a derisive footnote explaining that the Motel's 13th Amendment argument is so insubstantial that it requires no further discussion. Crusaders actually made the same argument to the court more than 50 years later in the Cake case. The Foundation for Moral Law, disgraced and twice removed Judge Roy Moore's outfit, argued that Phillips has been subjected to involuntary servitude. Having to obey the law is involuntary servitude. Religious freedom and race. In the months after the Civil Rights Act took effect, Ann Newman, Sharon Neal, and John Mungan went for barbecue at Maurice's Piggy Park, a barbecue chain in South Carolina. Good Lord. This is long. The details aren't as clear in the Charlie and David's case, but as clear enough. The restaurant was the kind of place where you pull in, park, a server comes out to your car to take your order. When Anne, Sharon, and John stopped by, the server saw that they were black and went back into the building without taking their order or saying anything to them. A second server did the same, although white customers were being served. The lower court opinion ends the story there. But John Mungan, also a black minister, told Slate 50 years later that someone at Piggy Park put a pistol into my head to make them leave. Oh, yeah, that wasn't told. That wasn't part of the story that made it into canon. Interesting. If true, Maurice Bessinger may have wielded the gun. He owned the chain and was president of the local chapter of the National Association for the Preservation of White People, founded to fight for the restoration of legal segregation and to boycott any merchant, manufacturer, or industry who fosters racial integration, making so-called market solutions impossible. Yeah. Bessinger was known to proclaim God gave slaves to whites and believed South Carolina's biblical slavery was a kind of form owning of human beings. Is Goofball still here? Or did he leave? Let me see. Michael. Yes. Is he still here? Yeah. At least, you know something, you're still here. Well, Michael, biblical studies, I have a feeling you would be very comfortable in this time period. You'd fit right in. I mean, you would get to, pull out a pew-pew on people and you wouldn't face any consequences. Defending your God-given right to be discriminatory. I think you'd like this. How so? I'm for the Native Americans. I highly doubt that. He was also a devout Baptist. That means he studied the Bible. Supported missionaries abroad. Oh, that sounds like the church I used to go to. And thought highly of himself because of his Christianity. I'm just a fair man. Let me say it in South Carolina. I want to be known as a hard-working Christian man that loves God and wants to further God's work. His restaurants sold Confederate flags and racist paraphernalia, including the biblical view of slavery. The Trail of Tears was actually you can actually get biblical justification for the Trail of Tears. That's what makes the Bible so great. You can use the Bible for just about anything. Michael. He claims he's for the Native Americans. I doubt that very highly. And away we go. Japan. Oh, yes. His restaurant sold Confederate flags, including the biblical views of slavery. Really? Well, I mean, you're biased, so that's why you doubt it. Well, no, Michael. I'm not biased at all. I've been on your side of the aisle. I used to be a Christian fundamentalist Christian, if you're nasty. I know exactly what you're about. Okay? So, no. I was raised in a fundamentalist Christian nationalist home. Yes, ICE is the new Gestapo. That is correct. Thank you, Archie. But yeah, so you're about distraction. You're using ridiculous arguments to interfere and intertwine. They have nothing to do with this. Yeah, ICE is currently arresting Native Americans or detaining them, claiming that they don't belong here. I mean, imagine the unmitigated gall to go to a Native American. And by the way, Michael, let's see. Let's click on you for a minute. A Jesus follower, photographer, and all-around nice guy. No, you're not. Single, rejoice always. Well, I'm not surprised you're single. Michael, what are you doing about ICE detaining Native Americans? What are you doing to bring the status of, how do I say this, the quality of life of Native Americans? What are you doing for them? Because all you're doing is giving small bits of history that we all know. The Trail of Tears, we know that. Yes, Abraham Lincoln was nasty to Native Americans. We get that. What next? What are you doing to help the Native Americans? I would like to know. Yeah, of course he's a Christian. I mean, this is what Christians do. Yep. American Christofascism is at the doorstep. I frequently go to reserves and help out wherever I can. Taking photos and showing that people's live. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Pics or it never happened. You know, Christians will lie about anything as long as it furthers their agenda. They're okay with lying. They will lie straight to your face. Okay? As long as they're promoting the biblical narrative. It's called justified sinning. And this is what Christians frequently do. That sounds a lot like hatred. No, I'm just pushing back against you and your ideology. I don't hate you. I just hate your sin. Okay? I just hate your lifestyle. That's all. It's nothing. It's not about you. You know, it's called hating the sin, loving the sinner. And that would be you. Christianity is literally responsible for Native Americans getting shafted. And here you are. Get out of here, guy. I can't take you seriously anymore. A Jesus follower. Yeah. Well, Piggy Park. Yes. Let's get back to this. Crusaders actually made the same argument. Yes, they did. Religious freedom and race. Okay, I already did that. Biblical views of slavery. Yep. Confederate flags. Yep. If you're wondering about the barbecue, don't. Louisiana food writer Rian Fertel visited and wrote, I have eaten plenty of bad barbecue in my life. Microwaved mystery meat, pork doused with vegetable oil to remoisten stale grub, pork the taste of color of cigarette ash. Maurice Bessinger's barbecue was not the worst bite I've ever chewed, but it ranks mighty low. Piggy Park refused to serve Ann Newman, Sharon Neal, and John Mungan because Bessinger believed that serving members of the Negro race would violate his sacred religious beliefs. Bessinger argued to the Supreme Court that the Civil Rights Act was invalid because it contravenes the will of God and interfered with the free exercise of his religion. This is the same argument Masterpiece Cake Shop Incorporated made against the Colorado Civil Rights Law. Exactly. The religious freedom argument was so ridiculous that the Supreme Court in 1968 laughed it off in a footnote. This is not even a borderline case, wrote the court, adding that Bessinger's defense were patently frivolous. This was true even though Bessinger opened a Christian mission in Piggy Park headquarters, became a lay preacher, and started directing a Bible study. No court involved in the case at any stage countenanced the religiously motivated discrimination, however well entrenched. Line 2 was clear. There was no religious right to violate others' rights. Like Masterpiece Cake Shop owner, stories about Piggy Park barbecue and its owner abound. The brave black women and man who challenged the law are all but written out of the story. Ann Newman, who worked for the South Carolina NAACP at the time, is given one line in most stories, and typically it's just identified as a minister's wife if she appears at all. Her husband, Isaac DeQuincy Newman, is rarely identified as NAACP field secretary at the time, or the first black state senator in South Carolina after Reconstruction, and a civil rights icon in the state. Cheryl Neal and John Mungan are mentioned even less. In 2017, Slate interview with Mungan talking of the gun to his head is an outlier. Court documents say little more than that they were denied service on 2 separate days. As far as I can tell, their stories of this world-changing Supreme Court win have never been told. The Masterpiece and Piggy Park cases are co-joined, inseparable. Is he still blabbering on? My goodness. This guy, he's a fucking troll. Let him talk though. Don't mute him. This is the Christian pretense of actually caring about issues. He doesn't actually care. He doesn't care at all. He's using the stories. He's using the problem to really. I mean, my goodness, it's pathetic. It really is. It's quite sad, really. All right, let's continue. The Crusaders tried desperately to distinguish discriminating against one stigmatized minority from discriminating against the other, but they failed. Utterly and repeatedly. I think this failure may be why the court pre-Kavanaugh didn't fully dive into the weaponized religious freedom abyss. It didn't, during oral arguments, none of the justices or the Bakery's attorneys could draw a satisfactory line that would allow anti-LGBTQ discrimination, but not racial discrimination. Interesting. Interracial marriage was outlawed in many states, laws justified with Christianity. Right? Michael Biblical Studies? Interracial marriage. Remember that old chestnut? Okay. Oral arguments questioning Piggy Park about interracial marriage, and I'm going to skip the dialogue. The Crusaders' clumsy attempt to distinguish the indistinguishable boiled down to the bare assertion that race is different. Really? Is it now? All people created in the image of God, therefore all have a worth. No, your own Bible doesn't even believe that. No. You don't get to say that. Even Jesus didn't believe all have worth. Only select people. No, it doesn't. In fact, it actually delegates certain groups of people using nasty inferences. They even asserted some groups of people were started by incest. I mean, How disgusting can you get as far as propaganda? And the Bible is full of it. Oh, Lot's daughters. Ask Michael. He should know. The groups of people that were accused of being started. No, it's not Mormonism. It's the Bible. Lot's two daughters started two groups of people. Okay? This is called propaganda. This is how you dehumanize groups of people by saying, ugh, they're not of us because they got started by incest. Mormonism. Well, Mormonism just takes the incest a little further, but no, you don't get to put that on Mormonism. Come on now. Be real, Michael. I know it's hard. Lot's daughters. You'll have to look it up. I don't have time. They homophobe, discriminative, predictable. It's impossible to draw a logical conclusion or consistent line between discrimination because once religiously motivated discrimination is permitted, the line has already been drawn in the wrong place. Line 2 was the appropriate line in this case. Your religion is not a right to violate the rights of others. Instead of drawing the line between night and day, the Crusaders tried to draw a line between shades of benighted bigotry. Racial discrimination is different in one sense. It is now reviled by most Americans. That shift in public opinion is due in no small part because civil rights laws mandated equal treatment. Justice Sotomayor explained this to the bakery at the end of oral argument. America's reaction to mixed marriages and to race didn't change on its own. It changed because we had public accommodation laws that forced people to do things that many claimed were against their expressive rights and against their religious rights. Those laws work. That doesn't mean that God himself is evil. That's man's bastard. Well, that makes the God a very weak God if he can't even keep his own Bible straight. I mean, what kind of an incompetent rube can't even keep his word pure? I mean, it doesn't matter what version of the Bible you read it in. It's still a disgusting story. It's still a disgusting propaganda piece. You understand? I mean, that's how dehumanization works. Is you create nasty story. Who hurt me? Oh, my goodness. See, again, the disingenuousness of a Christian is just it's unparalleled. If you're against their religion, it must be because someone hurt you. Well, you know what? I'm against Hinduism. I'm against Zoroastrianism. I'm against Islam. I'm against religion. No one has to hurt me for that. Why would you assume I'm hurt? God gave humans free will so we can follow his word which word? The word that man bastardized? Do you hear yourself? Guys, put your thinking caps on. I know it's hard. How are we supposed to base our life from the word that you say man bastardized? So that means God was incompetent. He could not figure out a way to keep his word pure from being affected. Guys, come on. These are softballs. No, man didn't bastardize it. See, there's a Christian that is arguing against you. God's mercy is new every morning. Yeah, right. Jesus was a mystic who spoke in metaphor. Hey, Matt, can you talk to Michael and set him straight? I think he's confused. Anyway, moving on. The laws work. Yes, once discrimination is permitted in the name of one's God, in some cases, the constitutional Rubicon has been crossed, and nothing makes sense. The most remarkable aspect of the case was how easy it should have been for the court to decide how miserably Kennedy and the 6 other justices failed to uphold line 2. Chief Justice Roberts may have inadvertently offered some insight into why the justices may have decided the case was manufactured hostility. They were personally affronted. They perhaps felt hostility toward their religious sentiments on LGBTQ equality. Roberts acknowledged during oral arguments that the racial analogy obviously is very compelling, but objected to decent and honorable religious bigots who oppose LGBTQ equality, perhaps like himself. being lumped in with the religious bigots who opposed racial equality. Roberts was deeply opposed to the court's 2015 marriage equality decision and even read his dissent from the bench. The only time he's done that in a decade and a half on the court. He began the diatribe. From the dawn of human history until a few years ago, for every people known to have populated this planet, marriage was defined as a union of a man and a woman. No. Even the Bible doesn't even define the marriages between a man and a woman. For any civilization at any time, at any place in the world, which is as untrue as it is sweeping. His anger was palpable. Just who do we think we are? Roberts asked his fellow justices. While Roberts might object, the reality is that religion motivates racism and homophobia. A year after the cake decision, Boone's Camp Event Hall, a Mississippi wedding venue, refused to rent to an interracial couple. Boy, does this sound familiar or what? Thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. Please become a skeptic. Hit that orange heart. See that orange heart? There it is. I can touch it now. Yay! Hit that orange heart, please. And become a skeptic. That way I can see your comments. They light up. Trust me when I say this. Honest. Oh, boy. Oh, God, according to your steadfast love and mercy on him. Okay. Thank you, aisle seats. Thank you very much. You now have an aisle seat to the skeptic group. How about that? And if you live in the States, I can add you to our skeptic chat. What was I? Boone's Camp. Yeah, Mississippi wedding video. We don't do gay weddings or mixed race because of our Christian race. I mean, our Christian belief, said the owner. As the story exploded, the owner reversed course. Christianity motivates both anti-Black and anti-LGBTQ bigotry, and the Christian justices seem personally affronted by this fact. Had the court gone whole hog and allowed discrimination in the name of religious freedom, we would have seen more Boone's Camps. Really? Amazing. What's the worst that could have happened had the court decided against the bakery? The bakery owner wasn't forced to marry a man. He wasn't asked to officiate a wedding. In fact, as a religious individual, he wasn't asked to do anything. A business organized under Colorado law and open to the public was asked to do what it has done for thousands of couples and provide a cake for a reception. The owner was still able to go to church and worship as he saw fit. He could still read and study his Bible. He could still condemn homosexuality as an abomination and justify that bigotry with Jesus's carpentry. The case was not the win the Crusaders wanted, but it was a win, and their legions of followers were emboldened. Their zeal was only grown since Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, under his eye handmaiden. Mercenaries plucked from their own ranks were dumped on the court. They're not going to be content with winning a license to discriminate. They're coming for marriage equality, for Charlie and David's marriage. When all of this really got crazier and crazier, explained Dave, we just decided that we were always a team and that we were always going to put ourselves first in this process. They learned to communicate better, and while under media scrutiny, we've had to be able to read others' body language or eyes, or pick up on certain words. They developed a language of silent hand signals they could use while holding hands. In the moment before oral argument, Charlie felt anxious and panicky. In the court, everyone except the arguing lawyers are packed tightly together on benches, including Charlie and Dave. I thought I was going to have a panic attack, Charlie recalled, but Dave was there. On the television show Arrested Development, each character has a taunting chicken dance they use to mock their fellow family members, none of them remotely resembling a chicken. Dave whispered in my ear everybody's chicken dance and made me laugh. I was able to carry on and not have a full-blown attack in the middle of the Supreme Court, a story that is all the more endearing if you watch any of these dances. Thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Be a skeptic. Join the skeptic team. Hit that yellow heart, or orange heart, excuse me. For communicating with the eyes, certain words and hand signals, to simply putting their team first and growing as a couple. A lot of that was really beautiful, mused Charlie. Bigotry is a mean streak, or bigotry is meant to break, but Charlie and David fought back and found beauty in the struggle. There are cases in which hostility toward religion is a serious concern, and we'll see in the next chapter, but they are vanishingly rare against Christians in the United States. This should go down as one of the court's worst decisions. Cowardly, mendacious, ratifying bigotry in the name of God. Opening hostilities, part 2. This will be the last chapter for today. Oof. Do you think I could? If only atheists like this man truly did more against religious extremism than sit in a TikTok live. You know something? Matt, you're right. I could be doing more against religious extremism. That is true. I don't think anybody here is doing enough. I don't think anybody here has said enough to push back against the lunatics of the religious right. I think you're correct. Pin that comment. Matt, you are correct. People like me are not doing enough against religious extremism. Yeah. This is the least I can do, is sit on a live when I should be in bed. I could be doing more. But Christianity in this country, it has just gone berserk. I don't know you, Damien. All right. Hostility in Hialeah, Church of the Lukumi Babalu Ai versus City of Hialeah. Ignorance, allied with power, is the most ferocious enemy justice can have. James Baldwin, No Name in the Street, 1972. Yes, it has. It has gone absolutely berserk. That is for sure. The Constitution envisions religious freedom as a protection for minorities, not a weapon to maintain privilege. But as we've seen, the Supreme Court has been reversing this basic concept using hostility. A trio of cases shows the evolution of hostility in religious freedom cases. Before the court was captured and corrupted, it decided a case out of Hialeah, Florida, that vindicated the rights of a minority religion that the local government was deliberately suppressing. The court rescued the religious minority. This 1993 decision is now the textbook case of a government body crushing religious freedom by targeting a minority religion. We'll look at that case in this chapter. Then, just before Brett Kavanaugh's appointment bent the arc of justice toward the Crusade, it upheld Trump's Muslim ban, despite clear hostility. So much for religious freedom. Well, look at that in the next chapter. Finally, at about the same time as the Muslim ban, the court manufactured hostility toward a Christian in the cake case we explored in the last chapter. In each case, the government hostility toward religion was a central and decisive issue. But this kind of hostility is remarkably rare, as Kennedy observed in his opening line of the Hialeah case. In fact, that 1993 decision was the first time the court used hostility to decide a case, though it had discussed the idea regularly. Isn't what's called Christianity now just another form of capitalism? Yes. It's basically a dominionist belief, whereas you need to capture the marketplace for Christ. That includes controlling the markets if you can, and swinging profits toward religion, preferably their preferred religion. Yes. Christians don't even love their neighbor. In fact, Michael, I dare say you don't even love your neighbor. Yes, we are reading The American Crusade. Please order your copy via Amazon. He has 2 books. We read this book a couple of weeks ago. The Founding Myth, Why Christian Nationalism is Un-American. This is on Apple Store. Is it? Okay. All right. Directing the hostility was genuine, directed against minority. The hostility was manufactured by the court. Of course it was. This evolution in the court's increasing reliance on hostility to decide religious freedom issues is one of the convenience, not principle. Hostility is now a pretextual hook to reverse engineer results. Is it on Apple Store? I don't. You mean Amazon or the book? Did you know that the Pope was a papist? Did you know that water is wet? I don't know if you're asking about the book or the Amazon app. I don't understand. I don't think the book itself is on the app, but you can find the book on Amazon and wherever books are sold. I don't know if the book would be on Apple. I'm not the Apple Store. I don't know. Oh, is there an audio version? That I don't know. In fact, when I looked up the book on Amazon, I only could see the 2 books. I don't think he has a audio version of it. I don't see any examples. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think it's an audio book form. It might be. I just don't know of it. Maybe check. There's another app. Damn it, I can't think of it. An audiobook app. Boy. Michael is trying very hard. Yeah, both books are on Amazon for sure. And I think you can find it wherever books are sold. All right. These 3 cases show the court forging a weapon. Okay. America is in a civil war, and if we don't admit it, we can't fight it. We're getting closer and closer. I don't know if we can say we're exactly in a civil war, but we're not too far away. Hostility looks like this. What can we do to prevent the church from opening? The city council president asked, voicing the angry crowd's feelings at a mob-like emergency meeting of the Hialeah City Council on a hot June night in 1987. The mayor and the city council, police department, citizens, and their God was united against the church. The Hialeah Police Department testified that the government should not permit this church to exist. Amazing. Amazing. The audience cheered when a city councilor mentioned that Cuba jailed people for practicing this religion. Another councilman cited biblical law, what the Bible says and what the Bible allows, to argue his point. A third member of the council said that this church and its religion are in violation of everything this country stands for. The council wasn't all talk. It considered a resolution which the city attorney described as a declaration that this community will not tolerate religious practices which are abhorrent to its citizens. Amazing. The mob joined in. One townsperson claimed the country would regress into paganism if the city council allowed the church to worship, while another claimed that the city would not please God. The hated church had just leased an old car dealership and began preparing the building for religious services. Before this, the church had been largely unorganized and underground. Sound familiar? That sounds like Christianity in Russia. Before this, the church had been largely underground. It didn't have a power structure or central house of worship, but was practiced in houses and at small gatherings. Ernesto Picardo wanted to bring his religion into the open. As he studied As he readied the property, service providers, water, trash, electrical stalled, and the city delayed inspections and final occupancy permits. The June meeting of the mob came down about 2 weeks after the church applied for several permits and failed the city's inspection. Already, this is beyond the trumped-up hostility the bakery supposedly endured in the cake case, but it gets worse. Beginning at the rancorous meeting and through late summer, the council adopted new resolutions and ordinances that targeted this church. Why? Because this was a Santeria church that practiced animal sacrifice. Oh, ooh, terrible. Santeria, which means Way of the Saints, has a long history entwined with colonialism and Catholicism. Santeria mixed the gods, saints, beliefs, and rituals of people ripped from their homes in the Yoruba nations in West Africa by slavers with the Catholicism that Spanish and Portuguese conquistadors and colonists brought to the Caribbean centuries ago. The blend matured on the island of Cuba, but the 1959 revolution caused the island exodus. Cubans fled the Castro regime, many to Florida, bringing their religion with them. Santeria rites included singing, dancing, and drumming, but also possession by spirits, acting as a medium, divination, and animal sacrifice. That sounds like ancient Israel. Animal sacrifice has different purposes: an offering to the gods, healing, the sickness is transferred to the sacrificial animal and then killed off, and marking major life events. The victims typically include birds, guinea pigs, turtles, and even pigs. Pigs and turtles? I draw the line. I mean, birds and guinea pigs, leave the poor piggies alone. Spilling blood to appease the gods scared Hialeah Christians, who seem not to realize it is central to their religion as well. Animal sacrifice is common in the Bible. Everyone remembers the animal going onto the ark 2 by 2, but in the story, the biblical God also tells Noah to pack 7 additional pair of clean animals on the ark. Noah's first post-deluge act is to build an altar and sacrifice and burn every clean animal. It's this sacrifice that convinces Yahweh not to rain down another genocide. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing odor of burning flesh, thank you, Rose. Become a skeptic for just 1 TikTok coin. Join our team. Be a skeptic. We'd love to have you. God so loved the world that he will send you to hell if you do not believe in him. Got it. We understand, Michael. We heard you the first time. Say less. Burning flesh. And I will never again curse the ground because of humankind. The biblical God tastes mature in what Christians call the New Testament. It is not possible that the blood of bulls and goats should take away sins. Jesus is meant to be the final sacrificial lamb. He is the atoning sacrifice for our sins, and not only for ours, but also for the sins of the whole world. This is what the ubiquitous John 3:16 verse signifies too. Thank you, Michael. I was going to get to it. According to Christianity, after Jesus, no more animal sacrifice was needed. So the Hialeah City Council banned it. The council wanted to ban the church outright. What can we do to prevent the church from opening? The furious crowd booed and jeered. Assistant City Attorney Richard Gross, good name, for correctively advising the council that it couldn't ban the Santeria Church outright and could be held personally liable if they did. So instead, the council passed new ordinances that targeted this specific minority religion. The regulatory boundaries... Colossians 2, our sins are nailed to the cross. Do you like 2 Corinthians as well, Michael? That's Trump's favorite verse, I hear. 2 Corinthians. First, it passed a resolution that declared certain religious practices inconsistent with public morals, peace, or safety. Sounds like Christianity. This happened in 1987. I was 3 years old. 2. Ooh, punishing animal cruelty, especially naming its great concern over animal sacrifices. Next, the city asked the Florida Attorney General if the incorporated animal cruelty law allowed a city to target religious animal sacrifice. It did. The state law prohibits the sacrificial killing of animals other than for the primary purpose of food consumption. Therefore, municipality may adopt an ordinance prohibiting the religious sacrifice of animals, said the Attorney General. With the green light, the council passed a resolution declaring its great concern over ritualistic animal sacrifices and ordinances that targeted religious practice. Animal sacrifice and ritualistic animal practice. 2 Corinthians to the God of comfort. Michael, first of all, you have no power here. Your Bible has no power here. You're quoting scripture as if it's going to do anything. Why? I'm literally reading them out in this book. It has no power. Admit it. It's okay. Stop it with the goofiness. You look silly. Let's say the third-rate crime to sacrifice any animal. Both were riddled with odd and broad exemptions that whittled away who and what the law applied to, of course. Not the hunter or euthanasia for terminally sick pets, nor the exterminator and his mice, nor fishing, not medical experimentation. Only the Santorians were left. The fourth and final rule didn't specifically mention animals anywhere other than a slaughterhouse. The rules carved out an exception for kosher slaughter, giving one religious a statutory exemption, but not the other. The exemption-riddled rules created bizarre and obvious contradictions. Well, of course they did. Governments can legitimately be concerned about animal cruelty and should be. Governments can also regulate slaughterhouses and public health. But Hialeah wasn't protecting animals or concerned with public health. It wanted to suppress non-Christians. The rules that supposedly stopped animal cruelty and regulated public health instead only prohibits acts when motivated by a particular religious belief. They included only religiously motivated conduct and excluded identical conduct when the motivation for non-religious reasons. But the animal is equally dead whether killed in a ritual or ceremony or killed otherwise, explained the church's attorneys. The rules created a religious gerrymander. Of course, animal cruelty and public health were pretexts. The true aim was to prohibit one form of religious worship. This is what the First Amendment prohibits. Shall make no law prohibiting the free exercise of religion. The Supreme Court held that gerrymandering unconstitutional. Simple religious freedom inquiry. Hialeah targeted religiously motivated acts only, not identical acts when done for non-religious reasons. Remember, the law can step in against religiously motivated action at some point. The question is where. It can always step in when another person's rights are violated. Line 2. But this case presents a rare and different inquiry. Can the law step in against only religious motivated action? No, because this would mean that the law has no issue with underlying act, only the religion. It's fairly easy to show the problems with this by analogy. The human sacrifice analogy to the Santeria case would be law that allowed child murder, but not when commanded by the biblical God. The nonsensical law doesn't ameliorate the harm. Children will be murdered. It only suppresses religion. Its only purpose is suppression of religion and therefore indeed hostile to religion. Now, however, crusaders and their justices on the court have decided that hostility means something different, that no law can touch an action motivated by Christian beliefs. That is, any broad neutral law such as criminal law against murder, the rules that sweeps in religious motivated action must be struck down or Christians granted an exemption. But laws targeting only religion are very different from laws that regulate behavior that happens to include some religious motivated behavior. Thomas Jefferson actually explained this distinction back in 1776. You know how these religious fundamentalists always quote the founding fathers? Let's listen to a quote. Let's see. Using animal slaughter and child sacrifice as examples. If the law allows the slaughter of animals, it must allow the same for religious reasons. Jefferson wrote that whatever is lawful for a citizen cannot be forbidden to him for religious uses. He continued saying that whatever is harmful and therefore prohibited by the laws ought not to be permitted to churches in their sacred rites. For instance, it is unlawful in the ordinary course of things or in private house to murder a child. It should not be permitted any sect then to sacrifice children. He said the same of animal sacrifice, but with a caveat. It is lawful to kill calves or lambs. They may therefore be religiously sacrificed. But if the good of the state required a temporary suspension of killing lambs, as during a siege, sacrifices of them may be rightfully suspended also. An important caveat for religious freedom in pandemics. No, he didn't deem their culture dangerous. You are reading into the text, I think. It's because they worshipped pagan gods, not because they were dangerous. The Canaanites, you understand, they lived together. They lived in cities, the city of Jericho, the city of Ai. All of these were Canaanite cities. How do you, if the culture is dangerous, how do they live together in harmony? They have laws. They have edicts. They have an entire culture. If it's dangerous, how did they exist together? AI, no, not artificial intelligence. It's actually a city in the Bible. You would know this, Michael, if you actually studied your Bible. It was the second city that the children of Israel attacked, but they lost because a certain somebody took of the cursed thing of Jericho and hid the treasure in his tent. By the way, his entire family was unalived because of one man's action. The whole entire family was stoned to death. All of the pets were stoned. The livestock, anything he owned was burned with fire. Now, you ask yourself this, which culture was dangerous in reality? The culture that was committing the entire genocide, or the people that were being attacked? Yeah, exactly. He was afraid they were going to stop worshiping him. So in order to facilitate that, wipe out all the people that don't believe in me. Yeah, a rational reaction to be sure. Exactly. Because what secure in his own power God would care, right? If he was the one true God, why would he be threatened with pagan idolatry? Here's a better idea. Why don't you show up to these pagan cultures and show them who the real God is, instead of ordering your followers to massacre? I don't know. I'm just thinking, I'm crazy like that. I just think of intrusive thoughts. Anyway. Just, oh, goodness. I mean, I'm a dummy. If I can think of that, why couldn't he? Why couldn't he consider that? Religious, blah, 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 Supreme Court, gerrymandering unconstitutional. I read that. Hereford, blah, 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 Thomas Jefferson. Yeah, okay, whatever. Hialeah cited public health to justify its religious gerrymander. Evidence proffered included a resident who had supposedly lived next door to Santeria for 7 years, spoke of nights filled with horror, drums beating, and animals crying. Are the lambs still screaming for you, Clarice? Do the lambs still scream in your dreams? Sorry. Anyway, moving on. Yes, the horrors, the animals, the animals were crying, the lambs were crying. And then I heard a silencing of the lambs. I witnessed throat cutting. The madman danced around the animals. She said, AIDS is transmitted by blood. Santeria, as I told you, engages in the drinking and exchanging of blood. Then the final dose of fear. There could be blood on their hands, under their nails, and your gracious waiter may be a Santeria practitioner who drank blood the previous evening. If there's a hint of a public health concern in there, it's too hard to spot amid the bigotry. Oh. We love the TikTok shop. Yes, thank you for 14,000. Thank you for the 14,000 likes. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. More than you know. Where was I? Oh, yes. Under their nails, blood. The city did better when it argued that sacrificial carcasses presented a public health risk. The Santeria Church insisted that it always cleanly disposed of animal remains, but one local cemetery complained of people dropping sacrificial carcasses over the fence or they leave it on a grave. Every day we send an employee to clean it up. We throw away the dead animals. That could be problematic, but it is dealt with by addressing disposal. If food waste is littering city streets, you can ban littering, not eating. As it turned out, the public health concerns were unfounded. 2 years after the case, the Los Angeles Times reported that sacrificial animals with the throat slits turned up in public, but, says Hialeah Mayor Raul Martinez, from time to time, we find animal carcasses next to palm trees. We pick it up and discard it, and that's that. Line 3 may be the best protection, but truly religious freedom in this case. The attempt to suppress Santeria was at least partly rooted in Christian privilege and supremacy, like Michael biblical studies. Yes. Yes, indeed. Let's see. City councilors professing their Christianity noted one scholar who studied the case. Local churches included Baptist, Evangelical, Jehovah's Witnesses, opposed the Santeria Church. A local reverend proclaimed that if we allow a satanic, Satan-worshiping church in this city, the prosperous blessings of God over the city could just turn into a dark cloud because instead of a blessing, this will bring a curse upon this city. The Hialeah Police Department's chaplain testified about sin, the worship of demons, and said that the government needs to be helping people and sharing with them the truth that is found in Jesus Christ. The chaplain added, nations that are controlled by this system of religion are in darkness, and the Bible says that these things are an abomination to the Lord. What about all of the Christians that are what about all the countries that are mostly non-religious at all? They don't have these problems, do they? And their quality of life seems to be much higher. It's amazing. The further you move away from Christianity, the better your country does. Unbelievable. Nations are controlled, blah, 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 blah. Okay. The townsfolk certainly saw this as a spiritual warfare. They picketed, Jesus up, Satan down, no satanic church in our Hialeah. Hialeah for Jesus, said signs, some with bilingual bigotry. Another photo of the protest shows a pastor and deacon praying over and laying hands on a passerby who they felt called to save. This is how we got the COVID from the lab in China. You know, it's amazing to me. Christians who claim to value truth are some of the most untrustworthy, lying sons of bitches as you'll... I don't know. You can't trust them because they will repeat any lie that they deem worth... You know what? I don't care. Unpin that. We don't need to see that. Unbelievable. Yeah, we're not going to have any more disinformation. Can you control yourself, Michael? Can you hold back the disinformation? You know, my goodness, where is the Holy Spirit? Why isn't the Holy Spirit telling you guys what the truth is? Why isn't the Holy Spirit directing you to stop believing in bullshit? My goodness, I'll tell you what. Yeah, the God of all comfort. It's too bad he doesn't Anyway, I don't want to be ad hominem, but anyway. Or what have you. Because they don't mix together. Well, I guess not. City councilors, oh, they laid down of hands and assaulted somebody. They were almost an official declaration of war from the Catholic Church. Wow, these anti-Santeria meetings and ordinances came as the Miami area prepared for a papal visit. The Miami Archdiocese was trying to root out Santeria out of its Florida adherents and promised to oppose a Santeria church on religious principles. Amazing. I tell you, the dissonance is strong with these people. I mean, the cognitive dissonance is just amazing. It's like they don't see it. Pope John Paul's visits, yeah, I don't care. Oh, right. The Archbishop was later criticized for covering up clergy abuse in lawsuit. A former altar boy claimed the Archbishop coerced him to stay silent about alleged sexual abuse by a priest at a group home for troubled boys. Amazing. They're willing to go after a religion and for religious purposes, but they can't clean up the sexual abuse, and they cover it up. Unbelievable. They covered up. This wasn't just government hostility toward one religion. It was religiously motivated hostility toward another religion. The city was abusing its secular power, acting like a Christian government, purifying the faith, as it were. It violates line 3 and was reason enough to strike down the ordinances. This case is the textbook example of government hostility toward religion. Literally, it's the most constitutional law texts. It's in most constitutional law texts. It was as if the extreme hypotheticals we debated in law school came to life. But the open hostility in this case is rare in modern Supreme Court history. This is far from a representative free exercise case, observed Justice Souter in his concurrence. The first sentence of Kennedy's majority opinion agrees. The principle that government may not enact laws that suppress religious belief or practice is so well understood that few violations are recorded in our opinions. Such hostility is scarce now. Yes, we see anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim bigotry and violence, but rarely manifested legislatively like this. Trump's Muslim ban is the exception that proves the rule. The hostility was open and virulent and atypical, and that I wondered whether something else might have been going on. There were two major forces acting behind the scenes in this case. One motivated the Supreme Court, the other motivated the Hialeah City Council. We're almost done, guys. Almost done. Congress pressures the court. Beyond legal principle, the court had a compelling reason, going to the very heart of the court as an institution for deciding any religious freedom cases strongly and decisively in favor of religious minority. Congress was challenging the court's sovereignty when the justices heard this case. We'll hear more about this in Chapter 9, but in 1990, the court decided that drug counselors who were fired from their private employer for doing drugs couldn't collect unemployment benefits, even if they took the drugs for religious reasons. Oh, good God. That decision was framed as an attack on religious freedom and caused a massive backlash. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act was introduced in March 11, 1993, and passed the House on May 11th, a few months after oral arguments and exactly 1 month before the court handed down the Santeria decision on June 11. The RFRA would have taken effect 5 months later. Congress openly explained that the RFRA was intended to overturn the Supreme Court's interpretation of the First Amendment in the 1990 drug counselor case. The court may have wanted a strong religious freedom decision to send a message to Congress that it didn't need to interfere. All was well. The court's Santeria opinion seemed to send this message. It focused on criteria the court laid out in the drug counselor case. Some justices attacked the case outright. Constitutional law scholar Kenneth Karst posited that had the chronology been flipped, the court would have let the Santeria ordinance stand and struck down the rule in the drug counselor case. In other words, it was political pressure, not legal principle, that guided the justices. Supreme Court justices, thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. Bowing to the Supreme Court justices bowing to political pressure is not without historical precedent, the most famous being the switch in time that saved 9. In 1937, after a conservative bloc on the court had been striking down FDR's popular New Deal legislation in a series of 5-4 decisions, FDR threatened to expand the court in response. One conservative justice switched sides to save a minimum wage law, the New Deal, in the 9-justice court. It's as if the justices in the Santeria case were waving Congress off. Congress enacted RFRA anyway. Hialeah motivations, money, and politics. It's at least possible that the city's initial motivations were banal and eternal. Political and pecuniary profit. Local politicians targeted the Santerians not because they wanted to open a church, but that they had leased the specific property to open a church. When we pull back the curtain, the scene looks like Carl Hyacin novel, bribery, corrupt, Florida politicians, an upcoming election, and pugilistic mayor. Hialeah was a corrupt town. One councilman had just been removed on corruption charges. The mayor, Raul Martinez, testified in that case just months before the Santeria fracas, and he ran the city like a Chicago ward boss, said Washington Post under the headline, Florida corruption probes proliferate. Oh, Michael. Martinez was Hialeah's mayor for nearly a quarter of a century. In 1999, the 6'3" 250-pound Martinez pummeled a young butcher who was protesting the Coast Guard's treatment of 6 Cuban rafters. Martinez was indicted in 1990, and the jury found him guilty of racketeering and extortion in the sale of his votes and influence on zoning matters in return for about $1 million in cash on property from developers. Well, it's nice to see nothing in Florida has changed. But after 6 years, multiple appeals, 3 trials, and a few hung juries, the charges were dropped. Martinez's legal tribulations overlapped with the Santeria case, which was in the trial court by 1988 and at the Supreme Court by 1992. During that period, Martinez eked out an electoral victory by 273 votes. 273 votes in a city of 200,000. Do you understand? Voting matters. Your vote matters, or they wouldn't try to suppress it as they are. His opponent in the race in each of the 4 mayoral races from 1987 to 1994 was Nilo Juri, or Huri. Huri had a blood feud with the mayor and was good friends with the owner of the property that the Santeria church leased. The mayor wanted the property, which he quietly included in a new redeveloped plan that would have significantly increased its value. But the property owner was also a developer and wanted to retain it until it was rezoned and cash in. Still hoping for $1 million payday, the mayor tried to buy the land for a pittance. The owner refused, so the mayor vetoed zoning changes that the owner wanted. The owner then leased the property to the unsuspecting Santeria church maliciously, some locals thought, as revenge against the mayor. The church unknowingly walked into Mayor Martinez's multi-million-dollar redevelopment deal and scooped up the lot he wanted. The city councilman who had been helping the property owner try to rezone the property had been indicted, removed from the council, and would go to prison for extorting $15,000 to rezone the same property. My God, there are no good guys in the story at all. No good guys. To fill that vacant city council seat, one of the mayor's employees in his real estate firm was appointed. Other councilors had just seen a colleague jailed for trying to rezone that property on the sly, for aiding the owner instead of the mayor. That could be a substantial motivation to shut down anyone that leased the property, not just the church. The church learned all of this 2 weeks after leasing a lot. the lot. A reporter told the church that the new city council member, the mayor's real estate crony, was going to bring up the issue of the church and present a number of legal violations in the next meeting. The meeting would devolve into a mob scene. There were also political incentives. Campaigning in the local election was well underway, and the anti-Santeria hostility broke in June. Voters would hit the polls in early November. Later that summer, Mayor Martinez claimed that the move to open the church is politically motivated, is calculated to embarrass him in the upcoming re-election, which the church denied. Pamphlets warning of the Satanic Church were left at neighborhood homes alongside other political pamphlets. One pastor of a local Protestant church with a large Cuban American congregation explicitly tied the council votes on the Santeria suppression ordinances to the upcoming election. Who voted for what or against what that night would be crucial to voters' decisions. This could explain why the council stretched the anti-Santeria measures over months. The week before the election, an incumbent city councilman running for re-election listed introducing an ordinance that outlaws animal sacrifice in the city's first Santeria church, at the second of three top accomplishments. One final curious piece of evidence suggests that something other than religious hostility motivated the attacks. These hostile government officials had family members who practiced Santeria and maybe even dabbled themselves. Many of the most vociferous opponents on the council had strong ties to Santeria, writes Professor Fred Frohock, a scholar who interviewed many of the parties. Frohock discovered that the city councilor who proposed 2 out of the 3 later ordinances against the church had a wife who was a member of the later religion, or a member of the religion. The mayor's father was a member. Frohock kept digging and found that all city councilors were linked to Santeria in some way through family ties, business associates, or close friends. Rumor held that Mayor Martinez himself dabbled in Santeria, a rumor the church founder Ernesto Picardo believed. In fact, Picardo viewed the entire controversy as politically motivated and having little to do with one religion, according to another scholar. So the 2 primary movers of this case each thought the other side was politically motivated. The more we look beyond the court's opinion, the more it seems like hostility toward a minority religion, not public health, was the pretext, and that it was intended to cover up political and financial misdealings. Wouldn't it be great if there was a Holy Spirit that could have warned the people about what was happening instead of finding it out years later? It's almost as if there is no Holy Spirit that could do such a thing. It's almost as if the God they worship does not exist. Just a thought. Whew. The more we look beyond the court's opinion, the more it seems like hostility towards a minority religion. Okay, we said that. There's a certain low cunning if that's true, and if it was deliberate. A local government violating the First Amendment is not a criminal inquiry, but extortion and corruption are. We've been asking in these cases, what's the worst that could happen? If the court failed to vindicate the claimed religious right in this case, the church would have been legislated out of existence, legally suppressed. Whatever the motivation for the local government, that outcome required a judicial solution. Governments can legislate in ways that impact religion, but they cannot target and legislate a religion out of existence. Sadly, the Santeria Church's Supreme Court victory was hollow. The church never opened the building on the property, at least along the Miami River, at the busy intersection of 5th Street and Okeechobee Road, settling instead for a small storefront 3 blocks away. It operated there from 1987, when the case began, until it closed permanently in 1999. The prized lot at the center of this case remained vacant for years. In 2017, 30 years after the church first leased the property, a 100,000 square foot public storage facility opened. It's worth over $7 million, and according to records, was part of a $63 million property deal in 2019. No word on whether Martinez, who remained mayor until 2005, profited. This is a seminal case in religious freedom, largely because it is so easy and clear. If the facts are as Justice Kennedy recounted in his opinion, and that's how history will remember them, the council deliberately targeted the church and tried to run it out of town. The government hostility is perhaps less clear given the political campaigns, corruption, shady real estate deals, blood feuds, and congressional pressure on the Supreme Court. Even in the cleanest religious freedom case in the Supreme Court history, there is more to the story. It seems at least possible that the hostility against the religion was pretextual, and the real reasons for targeting the church was more pedestrian. It would explain why there are virtually no other modern cases that feature such open vitriolic hostility towards a minority religion. Until Trump. End of chapter 6. The next time we read, we'll talk about chapter 7, the Muslim ban, Trump versus Hawaii. This has been Skeptically Speaking, reading American Crusade, How the Supreme Court is Weaponizing Religious Freedom by Andrew Seidel. Get your own copy, please. Ooh, almost 19,000 likes. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And with that, I will say goodnight to those who are on YouTube. Thank you so much. Hope this, not watching the chat today. Well, I'm kind of watching the TikTok chat. Sorry. How do you do shows at this hour? I don't know how I do shows at this hour. I'm insane. I'm convinced of it. Well, with that being said, good night to YouTube, or good morning. We'll see you on the next reading.